Come with me and let's have a journey on horseback. Welcome to SETI Astro. Now this has to be one of the most imaged nebula out there. It just has to be. And like everybody else, 11 years ago, I took my first image of the Horsehead. I was using a homemade wedge that I put my Nexstar 8SE on top of with a DSLR that I made a little Peltier cooler for it and shot away. And this was my result then. I was happy with the nebula. I had no idea what this weird accretion disk looking thing was at the time. Turns out that was internal reflections from the inner baffle tube of the SCT. They're prone to it. I didn't know it, and all in attack is right off screen, and it was causing just lots of internal reflections. So, continuing my journey, about a season later, I finally got a used NEQ6 mount, which is still my mount. I flocked the inner baffle tube of the SCT, still using the DSLR. This was my result at the time. I think I've actually lost the full resolution image of it, but I was hugely satisfied with this image. I had nice coloration down there by the lump star. I was able to get rid of some of that salmon pink I was seeing at the time. I really didn't know how to process hydrogen data into RGB data. I hadn't fully worked out all the flocking yet. If you could see on this bright star here, there is a little bit of a hoop. And that's really where I left the Horsehead for a decade. As you move on in your astrophotography hobby, you move away from targets you've previously done. You look for new things. Especially, I know me, I've steered away from popular targets and tried to go for some of the things that aren't normally imaged. And this season, I just happened to start taking data on the Horsehead in the early evening hours as I was waiting for other targets to rise. But slowly, night after night, I did get a lot of data on it. So for hydrogen here, this was 34 15-minute exposures. Hydrogen just comes through beautifully in the Horsehead here. Like the whole region is hydrogen. And the great thing with hydrogen, at least mine, the diffraction spikes and things like that are a lot smaller. So even all in attack off to the left here isn't doing much to the image. And doing a little pre-processing, right? You got to sharpen everything up, denoise, remove the stars, and then go into nonlinear stretching and getting the image where you want it for things like combining with luminance later, because hydrogen has all this detail and stuff surrounding it, as well as we're probably going to have to do different stretches for the perfect palette picker, right? And you're definitely going to see that with oxygen here in a second. So when the signal is very weak, like in oxygen, you get all sorts of issues, right? So my flats weren't calibrated perfectly out. You could actually see a big arc here from reflections of all in attack on other filters in my filter wheel. And then, all in attack here off to the left is just swamping it. But the signal in the Horsehead is almost non-existent in oxygen, which having never shot at narrowband like this before, I was pretty surprised. I thought there'd be a little bit more oxygen in there. The area around the lump star coming in just fine. That's pretty much all reflection nebula, right? There's actually no oxygen there, but with the rest of the oxygen signal being so weak, that is the prominent thing there. Sharpening, denoising, getting rid of the stars. Then we have to do nonlinear stretch. But with oxygen, if I would have just stretched it the same way as I did hydrogen, it just would have been a big white mess, right? There's no signal. So what I had to do is I looked carefully how dark this dark region was in hydrogen, and then I stretched the oxygen to match that same dark level. That way I won't get any like weird blues in the image when I'm done, and it allows the reflection nebula to come through. I did do some extra curves brightening for that reflection nebula, and that also helped tone down all in attack a little bit for oxygen. I also want to say for oxygen, this is almost 16 hours of exposure, and this is all the more signal there is. So truly there's not much O3 data in the Horsehead. And then for sulfur, I had a little over 12 hours of exposure. This is one of those nebula where there's actually a lot more sulfur than oxygen. Kind of similar problems though. I have another arc here where there was some internal reflection off a different filter in the filter wheel from Ulnatak. There's always Ulnatak off to the left, but you know, sulfur looked pretty good considering normally there's not much sulfur in some of these nebula. The other thing I did to get rid of this internal reflection is I was able to mask that area, and then I brought in the hydrogen as a luminance. You can see the hydrogen really doesn't have that internal reflection problem. So bringing that into that area as more of a luminance layer, I was able to effectively get rid of that internal reflection there. The other thing I did is I kind of used pretty aggressive gradient removal. I wanted S2 to be more of a flat field because that will really bring out a lot of the dust structure in here. And that's what I did to here. And now we can see all the dust in the bottom. That way we can show more of that dusty structure that's kind of hidden in the darkness, especially on the hydrogen. So I ended up doing two different palettes. One is the Realistic 2 in the Perfect Palette Picker. The other one was HSO in the Perfect Palette Picker. And that kind of gave me the reds I wanted up through here versus it being just hugely green. And then I smashed the two together. I do that a lot, take multiple palettes and combine them. So I averaged these two images. So after averaging the two together, it did tone down the greens a little bit more, got more reds in there, and now it's time to just roll up your sleeves and get processing, right? Doing some brightening, desaturating, getting rid of greens, things like that, to bring out what you want in these images, right? The other thing I added in there was a little bit of hydrogen luminosity as well, and then having to deal with Ulnatak over here, and using things like Clone Stamp and Blemish Blaster. I actually used Blemish Blaster for a lot of it, making smaller circles to blast it away. And then some of those other areas as well, doing some additional brightening and some other color corrections that I wanted. Ended me up with this for the final starless image. For the narrowband to RGB star combination, it turned out really well. Again, there was a big spike from Ulnatak, so I just clone stamped that out. And I think it did an amazing job. We really got some beautiful diffraction spikes from these stars, lots of different star color in there. I was really excited to see how the stars ended up looking from this. So the next was just screening it all together. This was my final Horsehead. Stars and all. Ulnatak tamed off to the side best I could. I think there's probably still some work that a better processor would be able to get cleaned up, but we're still on this journey. I'm still on this journey. So who knows, maybe 10 years from now I'll revisit the Horsehead yet again. But I think now we need to get up close and personal with this image here. When it's zoomed out, you really don't see all the details. So I want to talk about some things in here. I think everybody, is like, gorgeous, Horsehead, that's what they like to see, but I like looking at some of these other items in here. So getting in close, you can see some structures down here in the dust below the Horsehead, along with these two red dots. So something's glowing deep in the dust. And doing research, these are all Herbig Haro objects. Herbig Haro 3, A, B, and C down here, and then 2, A, and B. And you can actually see the structure of these little guys in here. They're streaked out. It's no Hubble, but I think it's really cool to actually be able to see some of those structures like that. And then same with over by the lump star here. These streaks here are more Herbig Haro objects. And then these redder ones are them as well, deep down in that dust. And then these bright star objects are actually classified as young stellar objects. So these are stars still in their birth cocoon, forming planets, just doing their thing at the start of their life. And the lump star itself really gives that beautiful like tunnel effect where the star's deep in there and it's blowing that dust away. So just a lot of cool things there. The other thing is that there's actually visible X-ray sources in here. Now, most X-ray sources aren't close enough and are too far away, and they only show up in X-ray. But these ones are actually visible. So there's one right there. There's this little one here. There's one up by the Horsehead there. And then there's this other one here. And, this one's even like a bluer color than the surrounding star. So yeah, that thing is hot, whatever that X-ray source is in there. One other really cool object I want to highlight is this star right here. It doesn't look like much. It is just a kind of like a deep red color in there. It's labeled B3313, but it has Gaia data from it, and it's 1.7 milliarc seconds of parallax, putting it at 1900 light years away. And that guy is nestled right up in the Horsehead there, right into the dust. So that, really puts the Horsehead right at 1900 light years away. And there's something just intriguing to me about that star, nestled right in there. I had to know more about it. And that's what I think the beauty of doing things like What's in My Image, let you really explore some of this stuff. As always, I've updated Astrobin with A Journey on Horseback, Barnard33. And then for the mouse over, I actually did a zoomed in starless edition for the mouse over in Astrobin. I have all the acquisition details written up there. And then, a little write-up of my journey on the horse with my old images and little things about them. Some other close-in crops from the new image here about the young stellar objects and her big hero objects. I've also updated my website, SteadyAstro.com, with A Journey on Horseback. This does have the mouse over zoomable. You can click and get the full resolution image right here on my website. And again, just a little write-up of this journey. I also have the full starless version if you want to click that and get the high resolution there as well. I know it was a little bit different video, a little bit of a historical journey in my go through the hobby here, and I know you all have them as well, your own stories. So if you have a particular object you've imaged, a long time ago and you've taken a new one, maybe go back and work through that journey yourself. And, I'd love to hear some of those stories too. So, put them down in the comments. Let's get the storytelling started. Please comment, like, and subscribe.